downstairs. So it's 8:07. Call this meeting of the Capital Program Committee to order. Excuse me, Wednesday, January 10th. And present this morning, Peter Kaiser, Richard Hussey, Peter McEcker, and myself are ex officios, Libby Gibson and Brian Turbot. And can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, that's a unanimous consent. Let's see, so approval of the minutes will be December 13th, December 19th as revised, and to hold January 4th. Can I get a motion on that?
So moved.
Second. Okay, that carries unanimously, there being no nays. There's no public in attendance, no public comment. Number 6, 7, and 8. I'm just going to roll into one. It's outstanding items and issues, of which we have minimal. Review the summary worksheets with the rankings, which is really actually complete. And then the draft of the final report with recommendations to Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen. And let's see. So I believe you all received a copy of the draft final.
And work on that. Very nicely done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I want to get it, we're going to dive in. Thank you. There are some minor revisions to make and some additional information to include. I thought I would just run through it very quickly from the top in the interest of being thorough. I'm not going to get into color and formatting changes unless you guys want to call something out, but there's like some stylistic changes that need to happen, but I mean, it's just really kind of moot at this point. I think what I was concerned about primarily is we don't currently have, although it's listed in the table of contents under projected impacts, debt service, principal and interest. I have seen in various instances where the amortization tables are included for the debt, and it's a reference, it's kind of a wonky type of a thing, but Brian, will we have those, or do you think, okay, so I don't need to waive that?
No,
okay.
Because I talked to Cinder, they're finishing putting them together.
Okay, that's great. And then,
so that's page 7?
That is page 7, correct. Actually, it's moved to page 8. I've got to update the table of contents. That's one of those things. So that would be debt service, principal and interest heading, see attached appendix E, amortizations, which are based on the following assumptions. And the assumption is that debt is soon to be amortized over a period of between 15 to 20 years with an interest rate of 3.5%. And then that will be there as a reference if so needed.
From if I may, just from
yes,
a
please.
stylistic, numeric standpoint,
yeah.
Should we, if a number, for example, is 0.7 million, should we say $0.0.7, just to people may not pick up that?
Yes.
I don't know.
If you can get Excel to
You're a
work.
banker.
I like the consistency of it.
Okay, keep it as is.
What you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing is if you all can get me a mask. I've looked. I don't want to say how much time I spent on custom masks for that because it drives me nuts every time I look at it. But getting it to work that way, it doesn't just carry it. How do I say this? Excel won't carry a null value as a lead.
It will if
integer.
You put an apostrophe.
Yeah, if you apostrophe
if you put apostrophe 0.7, it'll carry it.
I've got it in the custom mask, so it won't carry it that way. So I'll double check it, but it's in the.
I have to.
I can do it if you do it in a text field. So if you do if you actually input it into a field, you can carry the 0 as the lead. However, as a macro generated, it won't carry it through the custom fields.
Okay.
So, and then
we know what the numbers are because we've worked with them, but.
Right, and then the problem is these are all, as opposed to, this is all automated so that these fields are all filled from the spreadsheet.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
Going in and changing them. I'll do a double check. I appreciate the concern. I mean, I just think it's, especially if it's small font, so I bumped everything up to 12
Yeah, I like that font.
to see if we could get a little bit more legibility.
Can I give you a teeny tiny?
Please, yeah.
On page 4.
Yep.
General fund accounts, and it crossed out the list of them.
Yep.
There's two colons after.
Oh, I see it, fleet management and parks and rec.
Just take those out of there.
Thank you.
Jeez, who has the eyesight at this table?
That's the only thing I have left.
So, the other item we've got, and you guys, I mean, stylistically, some of this is just, it's gotta be what it's gotta be, but I just wanted to denote that, back on page 4, without changing column locations of the numbers, that the DPW individually listed categories are not part of the total, or that they're that they're not part of the total, that they're under DPW as a whole. So if you're looking at that column, it should just subconsciously read DPW, Fire Department, ISGS, Police, Harbor Master, and School are part of the total, and the others are a subset. And since no one mentioned it to this point, I think that I accomplished the goal. Right?
It's not too hard to figure out.
Yeah, it
you
should
know.
be pretty
Just some
straightforward.
people, very few might have issue trying to understand it, but.
Okay. I went through 67 requests, 86.5 was based on really where our list settled, and then the original asks. That's again on page 4. Page 5, we're going to include an appendix that's the typical types of Mass Municipal capital funding sources. And the thought there, I think, is that it will be beneficial for laymen and persons who aren't familiar with the terminology, don't use it on a regular basis, just have it as a resource. And it will include some that we're not using this year, but again, I think it's important that we're all using the same language. And I want to do some fine tuning on that just to make sure that the various resources I pulled together from the title of the types of the funding, as opposed to, so direct appropriation as opposed to pay-as-you-go, or whatever the jargon is we use in our finance and town admin is the jargon we're using in the appendix, so that it's all consistent. This is the place and time to do it. So I guess really what this is this will kind of segue us into the attachments, is page 4 are the totals by accounts, and then there's an appendix A, which are a description with all that information. Page 5 is the funding sources, and appendix B are the requests, is a summary of the funding sources, as page 4 is a summary of the total by account and department. So I'm talking quickly. Let me back up a second. I tend to do that. Page 4 is a summary of the capital allocations by account and department, and then this ties into an appendix A, which gives the detail of that sheet. Page 5 is the funding sources by account and the funding type. Then that ties into appendix, which is appendix B. Page 6 is more of a conversational type piece, where I found in the past in various manners it's helpful just to have a discussion points as opposed to getting into the nitty-gritty of every single line item unless someone wants to bring something up. This kind of gives us a direction for discussion, which is any request that's over $1 million. So it's just kind of an add-in there. And Brian, I'm sorry, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just, you go ahead and but we can go back to it.
Okay. And page 7 are the projected impacts. So what we've got here are taxpayer and ratepayer rates. And then under the same heading, projected impacts, we'll have the debt service, principal and interest with the amortization. Backing up to the taxpayer rates, what we're doing here is breaking out the commercial increase based on when you look at the funding sources, let me back up here. If you reference page 5, general fund accounts, you're going to find that there are capital exclusions, some required capital from operating, that's our 1 and 1%, debt exclusions, free cash, and other funding sources. Of those, because noting that enterprise accounts are funded from their own earnings, so they're not a taxpayer, there's no taxpayer implication directly under the tax rate. So of the general fund accounts, of the funding sources on page 5, the only applicable are under the general fund account, and the only applicable are the capital exclusion and the debt exclusion. So those transfer over to page 7, where they're broken out by the projects that would be funded by either debt exclusion or capital exclusion, and the respective projected increase in the tax rate is included. And I've taken it out an extra tenth on the cents, just because some of them show up as 0 otherwise, and it actually translates as almost a 0 increase on the mill rate, which is currently 3.53. So if your property was valued at $1,000, you would have a 3/100ths of a cent increase. But your property is valued more than that, so that number will actually translate into a dollar value. So I included the extra decimal place. Those are totaled, so the total impact on the tax rate, if the capital allocations are approved at town meeting and where applicable at the ballot, will be 14.1 cents per thousand for projected taxing increase on the mill rate of 3.67. So the total of $3.67. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
On that one, on page 7 there, the town pier office building and public restrooms with the asterisks that say that it's not included, not factored into the amount. That debt service is actually only on the 2.4 million. So that $1 million is reduced out of that calculation,
Okay, I'll take that out.
just to let you know.
Oh, on our spreadsheet, though, it listed as 3.4. On the
It
tax
does, but
spreadsheet?
the debt service is only calculating 2.4 because in the email that I had explained to you, I actually talked to Seaport the other day, and all they're waiting for to get final approval for that $1 million is our required vote from the local match.
Right, and then they'll match the
And
grant.
then they'll match that.
So
we're not at risk unless we don't agree to fund this.
Okay, but what I did is I pulled these selected, okay, a couple things here, guys. One, Brian and I have been discussing some grant funding. Grant funding for the Seaport grant for the town pier and public restrooms has been approved, subject to our approval as a municipality, and then submitting a letter stating that it's been approved and we're able to accept the grant. So that's part of the background there. The other one that we were talking about was the Sparks Ave and Complete Streets, and we don't have that same level of development yet. Although Michael had told me that it's number 1 in our queue and has been in their process. We don't have a letter from them yet saying, it's just not, they work a different process. So that's one thing. Number 2 is, I have a tax rate table, Brian, and what I did is I pulled the data, and I repurposed data from there,
Okay.
including the asterisks.
Okay.
The total in the, under DPW, or Town Pier, is 345.
Okay.
So that actually relates to the 345 number.
Okay.
Just so you're aware, if you
Okay.
use that for something else,
All right, because what I had sent you in that tax calculation chart.
the numbers reflect the grant,
Only reflects the actual borrowing that we'll do of 2.4 million.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted.
But just so you're aware, your table information includes the 345.
Okay.
Just if you were to use it for something, so
Okay.
you know. Okay, so I'm gonna remove that set there. Okay, that's helpful. Let's see. So we outline our assumptions there, Brian, if you would verify those just through a reading, just if there's a problem, let me know. And then we go down to C, also Appendix D, Town of Nantucket tax rate history. So the thought here is we're going to include a tax rate history because I think it's important for general dialogue within the community. It's kind of, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to make the comment I was going to make. I think that it's important for people to see the tax rate history. I think it's important for people to see the impact, which is why we're including it. And I think we all think that, which is why I did it on our behalf. There could be some argument back or forth, well, the tax rates, it only represents a sliver of what it is, but it is what it is. The tax rate is based, it's a mill rate, that's what it is. So if you want to argue, well, my property is worth more money, so I pay more, that's a discussion, that's a separate discussion.
And that happens everywhere.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I was gonna say, and then not saying I said anyway, so there you go. Again, I'm talking quickly, I don't want you guys to have to be here a lot this morning. I'm ratepayer, water and sewer, and airport. Brian, I just worked these up based on those quick comments you had made. Basically, the water, they're revamping and they're going to be water separately from sewer. Set revenue requirements resulting in a rate schedule adequate for its needs. Wanacoma Water Company will undertake a review of costs for ongoing operations, existing and anticipated capital improvements, and anticipated necessary reserves. That happens through their water commissioner board.
And if I could ask a question, how is that coming? Because I've looked at some of their minutes of the water commission, and they continue to talk about the rate study, and that it's almost done, and it's almost done.
I have not heard any update.
We'll find out.
Okay.
And I'll change tense on that to will, from will to
We're doing
has.
a rate study too, I don't think we've started.
For sewer?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Very
so,
preliminary, but not till the kickoff. We gotta, Frank's gonna organize with the person.
so I included the foregoing as presumed actor for the town of Nantucket Sewer Department through the town of Nantucket Sewer Commission. So that we explain why we're not adding rate information here. It
Yeah,
seems
yeah.
relevant for people to know and,
Yeah.
okay, good. Airport, I just point out that they pay their obligations from operating revenue, and then I give a derived from a rate schedule of fees and charges, and then I give a breakdown of kind of what those are, and that it's determined by the airport. Is it determined by the airport administration through the airport commission, or is it determined by the airport commission through the administration?
I think it's,
The airport commission sets the rates and
yeah.
charges.
Okay,
and
so
I'm
I'll
sure
flip
it's
those.
recommended
It's recommended by the
Recommended, thank you. Two, okay, good. I mean, literally crossing Ts and dotting Is here. Very happy with that. Statement of procedures, I went in and I corrected, I just wasn't really happy with the rankings and prioritization verbiage. It was verbiage, there was too much, it just wasn't as clear as it could be. It wasn't as concise. I believe I've accomplished the goal there. The other things I think were maybe, I think a comma was added or something. Procedural recommendations, I cleaned up the congregational planning a little bit, and I think I set it up so that it acknowledges that this is, this is the SIP process. It's not, we're not talking about, I don't want this to be, I didn't want this to appear to be something in like some type of an indictment or a slight against the workings of the community as they are in the finance and admin, because they aren't. I mean, they're doing a bang-up job. These are things about growing pains in the SIP plan, the capital improvement plan, which is really, our charge is basically anything that has to do with capital improvement, whether it's, new ones, old ones, how we go about getting them, how we go about maintaining them, operating them. So there's a wide breadth and depth of responsibility there that we're beginning to tackle, and I think, it kind of speaks for itself when you read through the FP&P. And then I mentioned I was going to change the centralized, systematized, which was primarily software-based, to incorporate a discussion that Libby and I had, a brief discussion that Libby and I had about capital asset needs, kind of like a directorship of operation, which came up with that little acronym CAN-DO. And the idea here is that, look, we're a volunteer board, guys, and we know that, and but we have a lot to do, and there's a lot more to do to meet the requirements of the FP&P. And what this is kind of a foundational dialogue piece in a way. This is the martini that gets people talking, I guess, in the circles that are town admin and board of selectmen and FinCom. Would you agree, Libby? So it's not, this is the plan and this is what's gonna happen. There will be a capital asset needs director of operations, and there will be, it will be self-funded by bringing operations manager positions in-house, and they will have, their role will primarily be to get that ship sailing so that Brian and Libby are not all hands on deck every capital season with shovels working through capital. They're directing and delegating and making sure things are done. And then the part of it is also that it's that the capital is not to get involved with individual departments. It's to help assess, plan, organize, report on, analyze capital needs for each department, not just one. So it helps, in that sense, it alleviates the pressure on the department heads and their staff by taking that portion off of their shoulders. However, they still retain the responsibility, as this is under the concept, to manage their capital assets and their inventory, and to come up with plans, and to come up with schedules of maintenance and repair and replacement costs. It's that the can-do group then says, okay, is that sufficient based on industry standards, and how does it fit into the bigger picture, not just financially, but in terms of how we're looking at the fiscal planning, but also in terms of how we're looking at how we plan, so that we're all talking together and using the same language when it comes to capital assets and inventory. And for instance, facilities, it might be that the facilities department, the national parks use an index, and they use their deferred maintenance cost versus their assessed value. You like this one. And they come up with a ratio on a per property basis in a whole. And it's an index. It's a tool. Does it give them every piece of information they need for managing those properties? No. But it's kind of like a report card and a handle on each property, and then the program overall to determine where they stand and what level of funding they need. The can-do group is the one, or the can-do director, whatever, whomever it is, whoever she is the concept would be making sure that that index is in place, and making sure that there's a system in place, so that the facilities director is not devising systems of how to track and analyze the fiscal planning aspect of it, so much as actually getting out there and planning, saving money, doing work in a cost-effective way, how many people we need, when do we need them, where do we need them, and that's what I mean when I refer to, at least in that instance, they're more mission-critical type of responsibility. So that was the that's the summary of what I changed it to, and I literally last night shot an email to Libby on it, but
I looked it over.
okay.
I like it. It was good.
Okay, good.
I didn't really have any changes. The section, was it specific to the section, like that bracketed section? Was that?
You know what, that's kind of a note to myself, and I left it in there.
I kind of like it.
You want to
because I like the best practice across the industries thing. I mean, I think this is something we all here know we need to get at.
Yeah.
But the public needs to know that too.
Yeah.
And I like the way you started about the growing pains.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, it's, as I said at the beginning, this isn't like, this is just reality. This isn't anything no one did. It's just where we are. I mean, you all have 2 shovels in your hands, and you're working as best you can, and it's a matter of resources, and then it's a matter of having a dialogue to identify what resources we need, and then it's a matter of letting that discussion blossom and be pursued to determine how best to achieve. From this, what I'm hoping is we have a discussion of objectives and goals, which creates a mission. And then from the objectives and goals, we have a mission, and we get the Board of Selectmen involved. I mean, this isn't we do, but that's you do.
Yeah.
And then from there, you get more concrete things like, well, how would we actually do this? But this is the foundational thing. Like I said, this is the martini that gets the discussion going. The other thing I just wanted to mention was the Appendix A. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of having big fold-out type documents included in reports. I think it's impractical in this day and age where most everything is done by email, and then everyone kind of prints up what they're doing. Hey, Christy, good morning. So Appendix A is basically, what I did is I've reworked the format to kind of fold the planet number and the description over the planet number and the project text, for instance, annual facility roof repairs. Those two columns over the center column, which is the more of a descriptive column. And as a result, we get, Peter, I don't know what you think. You're the only one who can see it. I didn't have time to print this up. I was working on it this morning at 4.
Bigger copies.
Oh, okay. That'd be great. This is really a stylistic thing. I just would like to get some input on it. And I have an option. And
So
Libby.
you mean like for readability?
Yeah, so what I did, I'm going to show you.
Yes.
The upside is that this is, what I did is I took these two and I put them over it. So I was able to make it one page. However, it's smaller text.
But it's better than.
But it's one page, yeah. Well, this is meant to be printed on 11 by 17.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking this is the type of thing that,
So this versus this?
yeah, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
I agree, the fold out, like, we might have, later, we can talk about what we're gonna have at town meeting. Remember we talked about, having some kind of a longer term plan available at town meeting so people understand what's out and coming up?
Yeah.
We might wanna have some kind of executive summary of this report at town meeting. We can figure that out later. Well,
Okay.
never mind. We'll
Just
figure out
not the
later.
week before.
Yeah, no.
Please. Not during the week before.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Don't worry. All right, so guys, I think what we're going to do is I'm just going to make some changes to that. So again, Appendix A was, there's a lot of information there, and I'd like to keep these things no more than 2 sheets if possible. And I prefer to have them 8.5 by 11 in a report. The way it's done is it's set up for 11 by 17. So we're going to change that over to an 8.5 by 11 by just making some minor format changes. So this was a column, and this information was a column, and I folded them over so that they read over that description column. It's and I can try and mess around with the print so we get it a little bit larger, but it's okay.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, I just don't. I mean, you guys work with other boards. I don't want it to be.
No, I think that the one that you have in your hand there is fine.
I don't want the print to be so small people
Well,
don't read it.
when it's set up to print on this and you gotta get it to 8.5 by 11.
Yeah,
it
that's
becomes,
tiny.
You know, microscopic, I agree.
Okay.
Do you have to make them all 2 pages? Can you make like 30?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to bump out. I think what I'm going to do. It's a matter of, to some extent, the column widths, the number of columns, but I'm going to bump it up so that we get a little bit more out of it. The last item on our kind of open items here to address is that in order to get, Brian had mentioned this in a way, perhaps different, perhaps the same. I apologize, Brian. It was several meetings ago, and I don't quite recall. But the state, under sewer, there's a state revolver fund, and we're looking for funding for the, if you look at Appendix A, and it's the second page, and it's under enterprise funds, you'll see highlighted 2 numbers in the right-hand column. So basically what we have here is that we need to swap some funding in order to properly qualify for, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to need to swap a $500,000 sum from the Surfside Road area sewer system improvements to, from the Surfside wastewater treatment facility phase 2 upgrades to the Surfside Roads area sewer system improvements in order to qualify on the SRF funding schedule and timeline and whatever that involves. I made the change in the report anticipating that, given it's something that David is aware of, it's something that does not further degrade the treatment facility. These are scheduled, but they're not like they need it to happen tomorrow or this fiscal year. But for this to occur, for the funding to occur through the state revolving fund, which is a low interest loan, we need to make the change. So I made it in the report so that all my numbers tracked, but I wanted to bring it up to you guys to, one, make sure that it's appropriate for you all in terms of our recommendation, and get your feedback on it.
Do you need a motion?
I don't know
It
that.
didn't change the total in any way. We just moved 500,000 of the 1.1 million down and moved it up so that we could get that entire project approved for SRF funding, the Surfside area improvements, which we had budgeted at 5.1. We got SRF funding in the amount of 5.6 million. So at town meeting, so we didn't change any dollar values. All we did was move 500,000 between those two projects to make that work.
It just seemed like, let's make the change now before later. It still indicates in our original request column what the amounts were, but that doesn't make it to town meeting, and it helps to avoid any type of confusion, even at the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen level. We don't need a motion. I somewhat intentionally omitted dollar amounts from our original motions, just so we were voting up and down requests, and if we had to make changes, we would have them, and then we would do a final vote on the report, and it would encapsulate any dollar number changes. So if there were changes, we didn't have to be figuring out which one we needed to make a motion on. Not that everyone's going to check, but just for the integrity of the process. So those are the comments, and I appreciate that you guys give me the feedback. And
Mr. Chairman?
yes, please.
Can we go back to page 5 for 1 second?
Yep.
Under enterprise account,
Yes.
I think you might want to consider moving the SRF funding under enterprise borrowings, because when you put it under other, this SRF funding doesn't indicate that it's actually borrowing. It's just low. It's either 0 or 2% borrowings. I don't know how you want to delineate that, but if we put it under AIP grants, people may come away with the concept that we're not having to repay that or borrowing that, and that is a borrowing authorization that would be asked for. So I just want to see if we can make that a little clearer to make sure that it doesn't get confusing or confusing.
I think it comes down to, either way we can do it. I think if you're comfortable with it, if we left it under other and we did a parenthetic borrowing.
I just want to make sure that it gets conveyed clearly, that's all.
It may be MA low interest or something. It depends on what can fit in the text. It may just be borrowing.
Okay.
MA subsidized borrowing. Let me see what I can fit in there.
Nice.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to say subsidized, it's just low interest.
Low interest.
Lower to no interest loan.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just put LI in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
And then I got to go through, and there's colons that need to come out.
Is this something that we'll leave it out and not put in borrows?
Well, it's from a programmatic standpoint. What it does is it actually changes 6 different spreadsheets to add a line that's a row that says borrowing and then knock 2 over.
That's fine. I just,
So at this point in the process,
I'm okay with keeping it there. Just if there's a way to add a little bit more descriptor, it'd probably be helpful. That's all.
now, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Is there? I think it would be. I didn't do it because it's in the appendix D, I think, or E, whichever is the C, which is the municipal capital funding sources.
Yeah.
But I was going to just make a little asterisk here that said C. Well, it's actually at the top. I don't need to do that. Up at the top, it indicates appendix C, typical mass municipal capital funding sources, and it indicates under funding sources to see that. so that if someone has a question about it, I was gonna do a little asterisk at the bottom of the page, I don't think we need to do it. Or do you guys think so? I mean, this is like really tiddly stuff, but this is important because, you know, the part of the process that I'm trying to capture here is that I've gone through and I've been living this document for too long. But my nose is in it. So I may have put it up here as a reference point, but you're looking through this as someone who's responsible to ask intelligent questions on the FinCom or the Board of Selectmen, and you don't know what AIP or SRF are just because it hasn't been talked about in a year. Would you catch it up here under Appendix C, or would you see a little asterisk down here and say, oh, I can look there? No one really? Okay. So I'll
I
add
would
it
look on
in.
the appendix of the,
Okay, thank you. One way or the other. Any other comments?
although,
You see what I'm saying?
I get a little bit nitpicky sometimes myself. I'm generally not a fan of initial things, hearing for the first time. Like, I like them spelled out and then.
Yes.
And then.
Yes, I gotcha.
Because otherwise, it's
Guessing.
frustrating sometimes if you're just reading and you have no idea what that is.
So I think I'm gonna put, I'll change the required capital to, that'll be a single, AHTF under general funds, AIP and SRF will each have a double, and they'll indicate C, Appendix C for description. You know what, it's like, ink is like way less than 1/100% for that type of thing. If it makes somebody else's life easier, it's in our template there forevermore. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay,
It
so,
looks really good. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
This should go out to every member of our community.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, so if we have a summary sheet for town meeting, I guess that's one thing to sum it up, but I'm sure a lot of people would like to see it in its totality too.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
Once-
you know,
once
we
it's-
post it on the website.
Yeah,
Right,
once it's
yeah.
done, we can talk to you, Steve, a little bit about ways to get it out. He can go on the website, we can tweet it out, we can do other things, we can get it to different groups, blah, blah, blah. all
That's
the
up to you
outreach.
guys. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
Obviously, we have to educate our
I'm more worried about,
townspeople.
I'm more concerned about just what's next in terms of our process and how we can smooth things out, you know, like developing a plan that's not just the SIP 10-year plan, but behind the scenes SIP, so that our recommendations are taken into context and they're not just, and I'm not suggesting they would be, but a lot of times plans get shelved, and what I would prefer to do is be focusing on those elements and developing a plan for the plan.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we have to spend a ton of time on it, but just have had the discussion amongst the, you know, us, and if, the, you know, the congregational thing even is like something that there should be a discussion to plan to plan.
Yeah, no, I
Okay,
know.
so those are the types. The, getting this out to town meeting, I think, I mean, I don't want to denigrate that. It's really important for the community to be aware of these things. I just don't know if anyone's found the silver bullet to, you know, like, shoot this over the island and it gets diffused and everyone picks up the information and they know it and understand.
Good.
People don't,
Possible.
it's, you know, busy lives, people are doing what they need to be
They
doing.
don't pay any attention to anything unless it's
Can you
directly.
put billboards on the
Yeah.
water towers?
Yeah.
small.
Well, and that's why the ratepayer tax rate is in there.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's 14 cents,
yeah.
no brainer. Yes, sir.
I was gonna ask Peter if there's anything on here that, FinCom would pick out, or if there's anything that, if this is a good format for preparing a.
No, I would say that FinCom should be elated. They better be.
Yeah.
And then I think the thing that I'm looking for there is, or not there, but just in terms of the format is, ultimately, our database will be, look, part of what I see my role as a facilitator is not just the meetings and the information, but also this process. And if the goal is that we have these templates in place and perfected reasonably, and then every year they're the same. And the data is actually dry, it's just filling the fields. and this is like a print sort type of a thing, and staple. So that there's consistency from year to year with respect to our understanding and review. There's consistency with respect from year to year with the FinCom's and the Board of Selectmen's understanding and review, and also the community at large. Because I think when you're getting information that you typically don't understand because you're not typically involved in it, and then you're very busy, and then it's in a different format every year, it creates, it's just disjointed. So.
Yeah,
So the idea is that when we're gone, anyone can sit in these chairs and do the subjective parts and make changes, but the structural aspects are in place.
Does it make sense to internally create some semblance of a flow chart that describes all of the software application, and where the data goes and how it's culminated? Does it, from a geek standpoint?
It's going.
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know.
I succeeded. He's not looking at me.
That's a compliment these days.
And I say
No,
that
okay.
very professionally
It does
because I think
actually.
it makes, it shows how it's pulled together. It's just not.
It does actually make a lot of sense.
It's actually going to be part of the process. It's going to be it's a good question. It's going to be necessary part of the process in the next step of one of the things we're doing, which is the database development. It will be like so many flow charts you're going to literally your head will explode looking at it.
Yeah.
And for ease of use, it would be my idea that we would have I call it one page just for this discussion, kind of document that the input in this page flows to the following chart, and the input on this page or this box flows to the following. Because as this works, I mean, we're going to have to update the back-end database anyway, so having that flow chart for everybody who's inputting into it so they know where the data's going, so they can look to make sure. Because one of the things I like to do is I input data, go to where I think it's coming out and make sure, does it look reasonable and is it doing what I'm intending it to do? So that would be one of the things that we would do, is so people would be able to look at the data and say, okay, it is working like I thought it was going to. So.
That's kind of like the can-do role, is that it's all mapped out to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but other people are actually doing the doing.
Yeah, I mean, we want to make the database robust enough to do all of this, but we want to make it easy enough that people can input in as few spots as possible to get everything to work, so that we have the, I don't want to say necessarily buy-in isn't the perfect term here, but we have the buy-in and the fortitude and the wherewithal to do it. So
Comfortable acceptance versus begrudging.
probably much better.
So along those lines, I guess there's just a couple of order of businesses to wrap up. Some on the agenda, some not, but they're all under the same umbrella. Brian, I do want to touch base with you just to get a quick question answered on the personal property end of taxes.
Okay.
We're going to need a motion to accept the report as submitted, subject to minor revisions at by the chair, so I can finish up what I need to finish up and add some appendix. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Okay, so we have unanimous consent. And then I think the other thing is, Brian, just on that I want to ask you about the database. Well, we have just a couple. I want to be out of here by 9.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
The database, and then I wanted to kind of discuss meeting, like setting a meeting for our next. We don't need to discuss all our next meetings, but set a meeting to discuss our next meetings, so we can meet to discuss when to meet, when to plan what we're going to plan.
Okay, so let's take the first one, or
Yeah.
whichever one.
Yeah, please, the database.
The database, so we have the name of contact of a programmer who can do it a recommendation from some of the people that I've worked with before, that they actually do consulting with. I think it's gonna really kind of require you, Julia, and myself to sit down and probably be on the phone with them to talk to them about what we want.
Mhm.
Preliminarily, because I think that we had previously talked about maybe staging some of it, because it's going to be a really large lift, and the goal is to get some of it operational as soon as possible to begin working on. So as soon as we're through this process, we just have to kind of find a date that works with you, so we can sit down for maybe 30 minutes with the people on the phone to give them an idea of what we want, to start the process.
Okay, so,
Because the goal is to have it built, a portion of it built by August, so it can be being done and used.
yeah, so the target is that it's FY '20. I think, I agree with what Brian's saying in terms of getting, it'll be a short conversation to get the process started. Once the process starts, it's gonna be a whole different, it is a heavy lift. Not getting into too much detail on that at this point, I'm just kind of curious, what about funding? Are we looking at, have you given, I know we had discussed with respect to, like procurement and stuff, we don't necessarily have to get into it now. Like doing this separately, doing it as one, and then if it is as one, are we doing do we need a capital request
Well,
for
I'm
something
with you.
over $50,000?
I think that the first phase is going to be less than 50,000.
Okay.
And I can fund it through professional services money throughout the finance department budget.
Okay.
As we roll out the the complexity of the system, we're going to have more conversations with the town manager. But the initial piece, given what we understand the cost to be, I can still manage within my budget
Okay.
to get that first piece that we had originally discussed
Yeah.
done. But the massive overarching lift is probably going to take more money than I can fund just in my and we'll probably have to include as we get ready to build it out.
And then just, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I articulate what I was thinking about this, and what I think when Brian says heavy lift is, there's really two, kind of what we were looking at, guys, is phasing this in so that we're getting the SIP request form, the personnel, those types of things that we're relying on department heads to infill currently, systematized, automated, in terms of, they have input support, fields are auto-filled, it's kind of a one-click thing wherever possible. There's data integrity in terms of you sign in, you fill it out, all the things you would associate with that. But then also the other side of it is the reports that come out of it. The reports maybe that we didn't receive this year that we might, or reports that we did that we might want to tweak in terms of summary reports of the by department requests and the current year ask and out year asks, and then the next stage would be trying to integrate past years so that we're getting, one of the things I missed this year, I think we all missed this year, was having the out years in front of us for discussion with the department heads. And that'll be something we talk about in one of our future meetings. But we want to incorporate that into the database too. This isn't just, 1 year outlook. And then the other part of the first phase would be the rankings, so that it's user-friendly in all regards in terms of our inputs and processing and the staff input and processing and the reports that are generated, so that frees up, otherwise it's just, there's too much redundancy. It was designed to be a database-backed solution, and it's not going to function properly until it is. It's going to cost time and resources, so we're trying to fix that. Please.
The rankings?
Yeah.
So, I
I'm
mean,
curious to know how accurate the rankings are to what our final recommendations are, because I know there was some
Sure.
alteration, and it'd be very difficult to determine kind of where that was,
Right.
unless we had a very good idea what our rankings were, and this is clearly something we can discuss in the
Sure. Well,
but
Yeah.
just it'd be interesting to know
Yeah.
how that
Well, and one of the things when I mentioned integrity of process is that integrity of process with respect to the rankings will involve, you'll be able to input your results and see them entered to a database report and verify them as you input them. So then that information is in the database, and it translates into the consolidated form, so that we know that there's an accuracy with respect to what was input translates to what gets into the reports. And I think that will address that concern, and I think it's an important one. I mean, if we're going through the trouble. I still contest, the rankings are really going to be, they're part of our process. It's a required part of our evaluation recommendation to be reviewing these aspects. I think the informationals, which will be like an informational review amongst ourselves over our understanding of the information, as opposed to getting into trying to, sway sway people different ways on a vote. Those informationals will be helpful, and I think Richard and Christie had pointed out that we didn't get to those, or at least we didn't get to those as much as we would have liked. And I agree, and it was just part of the process. I mean, as you can see, we were pressed for time as it was, but we'll do more and we'll improve. I think the database will help us to accomplish that in a number of ways. Okay, so that's phase one generally, and then phase two is more of this whole
Really,
big
phase
picture.
two is really, is much long, is the
Yeah.
big picture, it's probably.
Pulls in the can-do
it's
stuff.
pulling in and it's pulling in the template for the reports to be able to flow data to the report that's been created. The ultimate goal, the way that I understood the conversations that you and I have had through this, is that the critical piece that we want to get developed immediately is having everybody on the same consistent platform so that it can be done a lot more efficiently. And that's the goal that I'm driving towards with this right now.
Excellent. That's what I recollect too.
Just want to make sure.
No, we're good. And then it's got, if so chosen, it's designed and it can be, there's interoperability with so many other aspects so that everything is centralized in terms of, one source data and reporting for fiscal planning and analysis, and procurement and project management and, management plans, maintenance schedules, all of it. Brian and I were teasing that we, being the town of Nantucket, will be able to license this to other municipalities and derive royalties and revenue on a regular basis when we're done.
We'd like that.
That can go under,
Yeah.
It'll be a revenue source.
yeah.
So, guys, I guess the last thing, and then we can adjourn, is when do we meet to discuss out-year reviews and kind of map recommendations and talk about scheduling overall? I wouldn't mind a couple weeks off. I don't know when school breaks are in February. There is, just please keep in mind, Peter, just please keep in mind that part of the process, as I've discussed very briefly with Brian, is maybe kind of at this point with the resources that are available to the town, is to kind of shift a little bit of the capital request portion forward a little bit so that you all aren't getting jammed up with the operating budget processing. So that's a long way of saying we got to start earlier. I don't know when earlier, but I think it might be helpful just to kind of get together and have some discussion in end of February.
So school vacation week is the week of the 19th of February.
Is that right?
I'm sorry, it's the
week
following
after.
week.
Yeah.
It's the week of the 26th.
Into March.
Either that or I made a mistake.
Oh, I hope not in book.
I'm sorry.
You want to think about meeting the week of the 19th or the week of the,
I prefer maybe, do you want to do,
you want March?
I mean, we can meet informally and discuss some of the database stuff beforehand and kind of map it out. I think if we went into March with the understanding that we might, look, guys, there may be instances where we decide that we're going to need to meet a little bit in April, May. We might be meeting more frequently to get things up and going.
You want to meet the week of March 5th?
I think that's the new school's vacation,
You're right.
so the following week.
12th?
And, okay, so the next question is this, as my Irish friend would say, Thursdays at 10:30. I would like to, I would like to talk about maybe switching our day
Okay.
and our time. I know downstairs is typically open on Thursdays at 11, 10 or 11. I don't know if that works for you guys. We don't need to decide right now, but I just want to bring it up. I know Nat can't be here certain Wednesdays. In the mornings, there's just stuff going on to get everything set up to get here that makes it kind of difficult, at least for me. I don't know about for you guys. So I'd like you to consider that as something, if we could switch to Thursdays, as a general thing, and then, I think a little bit later. And I did look at the calendar, and last year there was no conflict at, 10 or 11, but I don't know, what you guys want to do.
Fine by me.
Thursday's fine.
Okay. And Libby, I mean, you're integral to the process here, and.
Yeah, I've got, I mean, throughout the year, I've got standard monthly meetings at, all over the place, and some of them are on Thursdays at 10 or 11. But I could move them on those days. Right now, I have something at 10 on the 15th, but I could move that person earlier.
The 15th of March?
Yeah. Want to try for 10 or 11 that day?
If it works for you, I think, I prefer 11.
Okay.
But the other thing I was thinking is, part of it is that it just gives us that extra morning to review stuff if it doesn't get out until a Tuesday evening, which in a way takes some pressure off the back end. I'm not suggesting we don't get stuff until Wednesday night, but it just gives us a little bit more leeway. If you're getting something on a Monday night or a Tuesday night, and we need first thing Wednesday, it's difficult to review everything you need.
So you would like the community room?
I think so, yeah. Thursdays at 11. So this would be, what would the date be for the,
Well, March 15th is, I think, is the week after the new school vacation, Thursday.
so the 15th?
Yes.
Okay, do you guys good with that? Okay. Okay, so we'll add, okay. And then, Brian, we'll, obviously, we're gonna have to talk before then,
Yes, we
and Libby, so. Is
So-
there, go ahead, I'm sorry.
One last thing, okay, so we need to figure out when you're gonna review this report with FinCom.
Okay, so there's a couple things there. I feel pretty equipped to address questions that come up. And, but I do, we have designees, and I would like this to be a group effort. So I would like everyone to keep that in mind when we're planning schedule. And I don't know what, other than that, I don't know what your schedule or what their schedule
Well,
is.
I was gonna propose the following. We do have some scheduling issues coming up this week and next. And in fact, FinCom rescheduled or canceled its meeting this past Monday, where we were gonna go and review the fiscal 19 budget, which is probably helpful considering what's happened. But they've rescheduled our budget overview to Monday the 22nd, and I'm wondering if we could tack this on. So I mean, our budget overviews in 13 hours.
That'll probably take 15 minutes to go through the presentation
Maybe,
with that.
and maybe people have seen it and.
Just so you're all clear, unless you think otherwise, I'm feeling pretty good about this. Is like we give them the report and they ask questions if they
Yeah.
have any type.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to do a.
We're not talking about a big presentation.
Yeah, I
about-
mean, I might say 5 minutes, like I said, is going into this. This page relates to this page, and this page
Yeah.
relates to this.
You
So,
take them through a little bit, but they get it ahead of time, so they've had a chance to
Yeah.
review it. Peter can mention it at a meeting before then. We're meeting this Thursday,
Yeah.
mention it then.
Yeah, I think we were gonna, now that this is kind of in this stage, I think we were planning on sending them this sheet with all the capital items on it, because we had talked to David a little bit. And he
Okay,
asked if he could get that, if that's okay. with
I
you.
would ask two things. One, let's give them the steak and the sizzle together, because I don't want to give them that and then they don't read the report.
Yep.
I spent way too much time on that.
Yeah.
So two, I'll get that worked out and to you.
Okay.
So I'd like to finalize it for Friday to send, is that okay? Via a digital version? And I don't think we even need till Friday, but just say Friday at noon, it'll be our deadline. I mean, we've met our schedule, but we want to refine, okay. And then, March 22nd, does that work for you guys? I think it makes sense to me that it'd be, FinCom is there to review general budget things versus departments, so we're not tacked on.
January 22nd.
I'm sorry, January 22nd.
What time?
What time?
Meetings are at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, so we have a FinCom on the 22nd.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the only thing that I have any, I think it would be, I think it's a good precedent to set, developing where we're going with capital in the pipe, that we have, I'm not suggesting we have to, but I think it may shoot me in the foot, but to have a joint meeting and we do it all at once. So we would do the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. Maybe this year we don't have to do that. I don't think that we have to do that. And it also, even if it was the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom, it would be relatively short, because they're gonna get in advance and ask a few questions, I presume. It's up to you. I mean, do you wanna do like a budgeting, just throwing it out there tonight, Christie, do you wanna consider that as opposed to doing your budget? Well, you do it the way you do it for a reason, so I was just gonna say, maybe do budget, do operating and capital at the same time with all three together, or maybe not this year.
Well, I gotta, yeah, that would be ideal, I think. But maybe it can work this year. I gotta talk to the chair and vice chair of BOS to see if they want to have the review of the recommendations of Capcom before that FinCom meeting, or when, or preferably at that FinCom meeting.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it would, I think in part we're needing to elevate the process, to put everything on par, because we are looking at capital outlays of significant amounts over the future years. So there's going to be a big shift in a very short period of time, the way I'm seeing it. And as a result, I think it's going to help town administration to put some of that weight on our shoulders. And I don't know if just submitting a report and a 5-minute thing tacked on to the back end of a meeting for each of them is really the way to do it. That's up to you. We've done our job, and I'm not going to get into the management side of that. That's like a bigger picture thing. But I just want to suggest that to you. And then Christie, please.
I was just gonna say, you know, there's the ease of Capcom presenting to both BOS and FinCom,
Yeah.
but there's also a benefit for the Finance Committee and the BOS being in the same room during that conversation. You know? So it's, I think it's a good thing, you know, to start getting into, you know, these meetings that affect both, you know, that both sort of make a decision on.
It kind of streamlines, I mean, I know, look, more questions get asked, but they're going to get asked anyway, so it streamlines the process.
And might as well ask them all in the same room.
Right, at the same time, and then everybody can get the questions answered and move on.
Right.
So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think that would be a January 22nd thing, or because that's the FinCom, should it just be a separate meeting?
Well, a separate meeting would be better, but I don't think we're gonna have time for a separate meeting, based on the timeline. Unless
So-
FinCom wants to have an extra meeting somewhere along the line. I don't know.
What do you think the appetite is there? If any?
No, I think the appetite is they're hungry.
Or maybe the 23rd, that'll be a heavy FinCom week if we add a meeting. Because we've got Monday, Thursday, and Saturday already for FinCom. But maybe we just sort of bite the bullet and get at it.
Noting that in the future, we're kind of switching our schedule around a little bit,
Yeah.
and this is going to be for closer up.
I'll ask David Worth about an additional meeting on the 23rd.
Okay. Yeah, and you said they can't do the 18th?
No, Brian and I won't be here, a couple of board members won't be here.
Well, we would have been sitting there waiting. I'm glad you
Yeah.
told us. Christie?
Libby, was there some reason you thought the BOS wanted to hear it beforehand? Some
There have been
benefit
a
to that?
couple of comments at board meetings from some members, when are we gonna see all this again?
Recently or in the past?
Like in December.
Okay.
Which,
Because I know in
what?
the past, there was a few members that were.
About the type of capital exclusions? Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a question I want to ask Brian about that, but Brian, can you just explain, I think it benefits the group to know, I know we want to get out here at 9, but just while this is topical, the capital exclusion you intend to pay, we have a capital exclusion.
We have recommended one.
We have yes, we've recommended a capital exclusion. We've recommended that, we've recommended a capital exclusion of $1.55 million. I understand the Board of Selectmen have a specific duty and responsibility about setting policy and the discussions that relate to those types of things. So I'm not going to tread there. But if you could just explain to the group how you pay that off in 1 year.
If all the items were approved, not only at town meeting but at a ballot vote, then we would simply raise that value in taxes above and beyond the levy limit for 1 year, and then it would be extinguished at the end of the year. So we would pay for all those items in that 1 year, and it would be done. So it's a tool to kind of manage our borrowings and get and be able to continue down the path of getting moving in a manner of making progress on of all the capital needs. And it's things that typically we probably wouldn't recommend borrowing for a long period, more than 5 years anyway. To me, it would be better to get them done and preserve the borrowing capacity, and not have to borrow.
And just to get an idea for you guys all, what happens here is that would be, if you look at your projected impacts under taxpayer and ratepayer rates, it's the one-time capital from operating budget works out to 7 cents per thousand for 1 year. If you look at your Appendix B, Sheet 1, it's the capital exclusions to the top of the sheet, which are all either vehicle or server virtualization, the SCBA's, and the playground, totaling 1.55. So just so we all had an understanding if that becomes a topic of discussion, what it is we're talking about. It's not an override, a 2.5 override, extending our tax base.
It is an
or anything
override.
like that.
It is an override. It's just
Technically an override, but just for 1 year.
For 1
not
year.
permanent.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, permanent. It's not a permanent override.
Right. It's just a 1 year override.
Okay. Okay, so any other thoughts, questions, comments? So you're going to,
Where are we on the January 22nd meeting? Is that
I'm
23rd?
going to let you know about that. I'm going to talk to the chairman of FinCom and ask him, and the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and ask if they would be okay with a separate three-way meeting on the 23rd. If they're not, then we might be stuck with the 22nd.
okay. Well, if we're done, if we do the 22nd, then when will we be at the Board of Selectmen?
That's another thing I want to ask Dawn. Can we just invite the board to the 22nd, and that's how they're going to hear it? Or if we need to have a separate meeting, when are we going to do that? So
Okay.
that would probably be either, if we want the committee, to come to the BOS meeting, that would be either next week, the 17th, or the 24th, I would imagine. I suppose possibly the 7th, but actually, we only need to be the 17th of the, we only need to be the 17th.
It's up to you, it's up to them. I think, I think it would be more beneficial to meet as a group for the reasons we stated. And the reason we didn't state is that me standing up in front of a microphone is like just watching a chicken on a wire. It's not a pretty thing. If I can sit here, we can have a group discussion versus a presentation.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to torture me, they can have it be separate meetings, but
And
it's,
I don't think the board necessarily is looking for robust presentation. What we
no.
would probably do is give them the report ahead of time, and then maybe project the list of stuff.
I think given, I don't want to over and redundant, but given what we have in front of us this year, and give us where we're going year after year, I think it would be a good thing to start for the community to, there's a joint meeting type of a thing. I think there's a lot of value that goes unsaid beyond just the application of getting together and talking. So I'm just trying to look at that bigger picture thing. And Libby, you support that?
Yeah, I definitely support that.
Okay, and you'll transmit to them
Yeah.
that it's not, we're just
Yeah.
looking for a meeting so we can,
Yeah, they had supported that early on, and then things fell apart with the special town meeting and other stuff all happened, so it just never progressed.
yeah, okay, great.
So is it 4 o'clock either day? 22nd, 23rd? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for penning that down.
So I'll get back to
You
you.
too, Richard.
feel like I'm at Trump's meeting yesterday.
Yeah, but we're not being, oh, we are being televised. Confused? Oh, we're just dates? Hey, if you're not,
Yeah.
if you're not confused over the report, I did my
Yeah.
job.
Okay.
Can I ask and get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for your hard work on this.
You're welcome.